And welcome to this week's edition of the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast. Rob Reigns, Mike Reigns with you. And again, here as we tape this show on Friday morning back in our STL Sports Page studio. Mike's on the road this week, but obviously still paying close attention to what's going on with the ball club.
Obviously got to keep watching. You got to fight to the finish here to make the postseason. I'm not going back on that.
We're going to get to that here in a second, where the current standings are as of today. We first want to mention, of course, that our podcast brought to you, like all of our content here on STLSportsPage.com, without a paywall, thanks to Archwell Health, the AAA Travel of Missouri, and, of course, our title sponsor for everything we do here on the website, the Drury Hotel family of hotels. So I encourage you to check out all of these great sponsors. You can find their links on our website. If you have any health needs, any hotel needs, any lumber needs, healthcare insurance needs, any of those kind of things, be sure to check out all of our great sponsors. And of course, now, Mike, thanks to you, we've got our podcast available on a lot more platforms than it used to be.
We're trying to make it easy for everybody to listen anywhere they want to, in the car, on a walk, wherever they go. So Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast, you can do that. And you can also tell Alexa and Google to play it too. And so when you're at home cleaning or doing whatever you're doing, you can listen to it too. Or if you want to watch the video, you can check it out on YouTube or Spotify as well.
Appreciate all your help in getting all that set up. Of course, we got a lot to talk about. Busy week for the Cardinals there in Toronto as we speak to start this 3-game series against the Blue Jays this weekend. Eric Fetty will get the start tonight. The rotation for Saturday and Sunday's game still to be announced. And I know, Mike, that's something that you're got on your mind as well.
Well, I think as you look at this rotation, you got to start to figure out, yes, we're trying to push hard for this year, but we also got to figure out what to do for next year. And so as you look at a few things here, you look at the recent success, some of the starting pitching starting to turn around and some of it's having some issues. Sonny Gray's last 2 starts, 1.3 ERA, 13 innings, 16 Ks. Looks pretty good. Kyle Gibson's last 2 starts, 0.66 ERA, 13.2 innings, 15 Ks, 3 walks. Miles Michaelis, month of September, he's got a 13.5 ERA. So you want to compare that to 2 starts, and you want to say, okay, well, maybe 2 starts is not good. Let's look at the last 5 starts then. 6.9 ERA over 23 innings in his last 5 starts. And when you look at it, he's still signed for $16 million next year. You want to pay somebody $16 million to have a 7 ERA?
No, I don't. And so, I think that's a big question. I mean, you've also got Lance Lynn came back and made the start on Wednesday in his first game back since July 30th. Pitched okay, but they face roster decisions about both him and Kyle Gibson, who have options for next year. The 3 starters you have right now who are under contract for next year are Sonny Gray, Eric Fetty, was a 2-year contract when they picked him up in the trade, and then Miles Michaelis, as you mentioned. And then, of course, Palante is still under team control, even though he's technically not signed for next year. So,
and Steven Matz.
And Matt's correct. So I mean, they've got, and that's not even count any of the other young guys. So they have so many different guys that you want to, think about as far as, how you go into spring training in 2025, projecting a 5-man rotation. Right now, there's not room for any of them.
And it's $16 million for Michaelis. Both Kyle's option and Lance Lynn's option are $12 million. So they're cheaper options, but they're not under contract.
Right. So, so they're just going to have some tough decisions to make. And I think one of the things is Cardinals sit here on Friday morning. There's 6 games out of the 3rd wild card spot, 16 games to play. That's problematic by itself. But then add in the fact that you're chasing 3 teams, which is Atlanta, the Mets, and the Cubs. So I know you're optimistic. I know you're kind of one of those guys that wants to hold out hope until the last minute, and they tell you that the race is over. But the odds are not in the Cardinals' favor. I think they have like a decimal point chance of making the playoffs according to all those prognostications. So to me, let's get a look at some of these young guys, and I don't know that we need to see another start from Lance Lynn to make a decision about him for next year. I don't know that you need to see another start from Miles Michaelis. You don't know that you need to see, maybe another start from Kyle Gibson. I'd want to see what Gordon Graceffo can do another time or two. I want to see what Michael McGreevy can do another time or two. They're not going to bring up Quinn Matthews. The Springfield Cardinals are in the playoffs. But to me, you also project him as a potential candidate coming into spring training next year to make this rotation. So let's see what we got.
And I think the other tough part is the Cardinals' track record has been, if they've got money tied into a guy that's locked into a contract, they're not quick to release him and let him go. Let's look way back to the Brett Cecil of the world that we just held on to forever and forever. And so I'm afraid to say it, but I think Michaelis is probably here to stay because they feel like, well, he's already signed and locked into it. He can turn it around. And I don't see that happening.
Well, the track record, as you mentioned, you could go back, even before the All-Star break, and the second half of the season has not been good. So it will definitely be interesting to see what decisions they make as far as the rotation is concerned, specifically with Michaelis as we go forward here, going into the rest of this season, and then projecting plans for 2025. One player that we did get to see for the first time in a big league uniform this week, and I think acquitted himself very well, was Thomas Agisi. They made the move to call him up from Memphis when they decided they needed to give Mason Wynn a day off. And he's got the first 3 starts of his career, 1 at shortstop, 2 at second base. And I think it's probably surprised some people. Not everybody thought he could be a good hitter and got his first 2 hits on Thursday, but I think he might have surprised some people with how well he played on defense.
He made a couple moves up the middle that were very nice. And, the first couple games he had a little hard luck hitting because, he hit a couple balls hard that just weren't hits, and then finally gets the, bloop single there. But, once you break through, it's exciting for him to see it. And it was cool to see his dad and family and how excited they were in the stands.
It's a great backstory. If anybody missed our long-form feature on JC back before in spring training, when people probably didn't really know much about him, it's available on the website. Just do a search for Thomas JC and you'll find it. We did put it out on Twitter again when he got called up the other day. But really good kid, and I think he's going to be a really nice player. And he's an example of why I really think that the Cardinals have a really good future with some of the young players. They just got to figure out how they fit into this picture and where they're going to play going forward.
And another, when you look at it, some of these young kids like Luke and Baker that, took forever to get called up, same thing. What do you do with Paul Goldschmidt? The way Paul Goldschmidt has played this year has been a lot better. And so where does Lucan fit into this team if Goldie is back here playing the way that he's playing, or Burleson's playing the way that he's playing? And then the ripple effect is what happens to Chandler Redmond, who's been fantastic and finally got promoted. So what do they do?
Yeah, and I think we all agree that Burleson probably is better suited to be at first base or as the DH, but then you got a bunch of competition for those spots, and it's and I don't think Goldschmidt's going to return here without a promise of pretty much being the everyday starter, and maybe people have speculated that maybe he'd take a lower base salary with a lot of incentives to stay. I just don't see that happening. I think you're going to have to pay him what he feels like he deserves and guarantee him a pretty much a regular playing spot, or he's going to look elsewhere if he decides he still wants to play another year. And based on how he's ending this season, I would be very surprised if he's not playing somewhere in 2025.
You think somebody else will pay him a sizable contract to play first base?
Yes, because of the fact that I think it would be a shorter term contract. Maybe 1 year and an option, maybe 2 years at the most. It's not like he's going to go in there and expect a 5-year contract. So I would think teams tend to generally overpay to get somebody if it's a shorter term than a longer term. And the other thing, don't forget, the Cardinals have a lot of tough decisions to make financially, not only with the starting pitching and do they release any of these guys. There's a big uncertainty about the future of the TV revenue with this club going forward. They're still involved in all this mess with the Valley Sports contract negotiations with bankruptcy. So I think they're going to be really kind of reticent to take on any extra payroll that they don't have to. I think they're going to try to maybe shed a little payroll. And if they can do that and still stay competitive, I think that's what they're going to try to do.
And there was a story that came out just, a week or so ago about Amazon trying to come in and buy the streaming rights from Bally's, which would certainly alter things. And if that happened to lock up here pretty soon, that would certainly stabilize the financial impact of the Cardinals, which would allow them to do a few things more. And that's my worry with the starting rotation is if you're trying to cut budget, you can find maybe a better pitcher than Miles Michaelis for less money, but are you willing to try to squeeze it that tight to make those moves or not?
Yeah, and that's what we can't decide. And part of the problem with doing that is we don't know who's going to be making these decisions at this point because the Cardinals have already made one significant front office move this week. They announced the upcoming retirement of Gary LaRocque, who's been the director of player development for a long time, kind of overseeing the minor league organizations and has helped develop a lot of these players that have gotten to the big leagues. Maybe they've stalled once they got here or didn't play as well as they expected them to play at this level, but no fault of Gary and his staff to get them here. I think that they've obviously deserved the chance to play up here. And, the guys that Randy Flores and his scouts have put into the organization, I think are a lot of exciting young prospects. But with Gary's retirement, that's a big spot to fill. We don't know who's going to get that job. Is that, again, kind of the trickle down effect of other moves that might be made in the front office? John Mozeliak has said there will be changes. We don't know exactly what all those changes are going to end up being. He is under contract as the president of baseball operations next year. A lot of speculation that Chaim Bloom, who joined the organization this year as a consultant, who, of course, has had front office experience in Tampa Bay and in Boston, might be the guy to take over. But we don't know that for sure or when that's going to happen. If either one of those moves are made, then what does that affect the future of the managers and his future going forward? How does that affect the future of the coaching staff? I mean, there are just a lot of trickle down of decisions, and I think they have to kind of answer some of those bigger picture questions before they can get into the specifics of the budget and the salary and then any player moves that they're going to have to make.
These last couple weeks of the season are going to be very important for multiple reasons, right? Because one, you've got a team that still thinks they can make the postseason. And, it's frustrating when you look back and see games over this last little stretch that they could have won and they didn't, and I think that's what's frustrating watching this team is you think they've got, a chance to win a few more games than they do. And so that's why I think, I hold out hope that they still have a chance to make it. But if this team does play well and make the postseason, does that then alter the plans that they may be thinking right now of what to do and shuffle in the front office? Because you go 2 years in a row, with pretty down seasons, then that, is going to force some hands to make some decisions. But all of a sudden the team turns it on in the end and makes the postseason, then do you look differently at this team and say, well, maybe they just didn't play that way we thought they would all year.
Visiting with Mike Raines here on the Raines on the Cardinals podcast. This week's edition brought to you, of course, by Archwell Health, Drury Hotels, AAA Travel of Missouri. And Mike, I think the other thing is I'm excited to see what Sajisi can do over the next couple of weeks. Hope he gets to play regularly. We have heard a commitment from the Cardinals that they're going to play Jordan Walker on a regular basis here toward the end of the season. Maybe not every day, but a regular basis. But I think they missed the mark when they made the decision to bring up Sajisi because the player they sent back to Memphis was Victor Scott II and decided they're going to play Michael Ciani. And no offense to Ciani, but I think you and I both would like to see what Victor Scott II could do given a regular run at that center field position.
And given the ability to relax a little bit, right? I think some players calm down when they know that, okay, it's your spot, just go out and play and stay relaxed, right? And it makes it a little bit easier to do. And Ciani's played very well this year, but I don't think you could find a single person in the front office. And if you can, maybe we all missed the boat, but there's not a single person that could tell you coming into this season, they thought that Michael Ciani would be their long-term impact center fielder. And so if that's not the case, then what are we doing at this point in time? Just wasting Victor Scott's service time by bringing him up, sending him back, bringing him up, sending him back. Like what are we doing?
I mean, they did say that, even when they said that Ciani was going to play when he came back from the oblique injury, that, and again, no disrespect to him. He has played very well. Probably would be a really strong candidate to win the Gold Glove in center field this year if he just played a couple more innings and just missed the cutoff there. But I think that, like long-term going forward, Victor Scott II is a really exciting player. I mean, he stole 94 bases in the minor leagues last year. Hasn't had a chance to run that much. He wants to get some work defensively. He did it with Willie McGee up here and try to see if he can replicate the work that he did on getting a jump and a better read, maybe on some balls. And I just think that the future is brighter with him. And Ciani's still a young player too, and does a lot of nice things. But to me, on a team, especially that's starving for offense specifically among the outfielders, I just think Victor Scott II gives you a little more potential for that than Michael Ciani does.
And the biggest thing you keep hearing in comments that the front office is saying is that Victor Scott really needs to work on his first step, that first jump defensively. And they feel that he can do that better in Memphis where he can play every day as opposed to just getting work pregame with Willie McGee. And they said the highlight on Ciani is the fact that his first step is really good. And so defensively, they like him out there better right now. Now, is that the long-term goal? Probably not. But hopefully Victor can work on that fairly quick and start to develop that the way that the Cardinals want it.
In a perfect scenario, a perfect world scenario, your starting center fielder for this entire season would have been Tommy Edman. And you would have had Victor Scott II playing every day in Memphis for the whole year, just like Sajisi has done, and getting the call up here right at the end of the season. And I think how much this kind of up and back and whatever has affected Victor Scott's future is to be determined. But you can't deny the fact that this team misses Tommy Edman. And I want to highlight a couple of guys that – go ahead.
And I was just going to say, I know that we needed starting pitching, but man, Tommy Edmonds hitting fifth in that Dodger lineup. He just had back-to-back 2-homer games and just looks fantastic playing defense out there and playing for them. And I think that's a big loss for the Cardinals.
Well, I'll just give you one stat. In his 57 at-bats with the Dodgers playing center field, he has hit 4 home runs. The Cardinals this season have had a combined total of 475 at-bats from the players playing center field with 4 home runs on a team that really needs offense against right-handed pitching. He even hit two of those home runs were switch hit home runs. The first time in his career, he's hit 2 home runs in a game, 1 from each side of the plate. So, and everybody knew Tommy Edman was a good player. And I think they just felt like with Ciani and Scott that they had options in center field. They didn't know that Ciani was going to get hurt 2 days after the trade deadline. But I think when you look at the fact that they trade Edman, and this is kind of what point I want to make about some of these recent transactions, you can make the case about why they made the trade. I think where you have to have a kind of more of a step back and look at the bigger picture is not the fact that they traded the 4 guys I'm going to mention here. It's what they got in return. I mean, one of the guys they got in return for Tommy Edman was Tommy Pham, who was here, about a month and then got DFA'd. So Fetty, of course, is under contract for next year. He's pitching again on Friday night, but I don't think he's overwhelmed anybody with how well he's pitched since the trade.
And I think the tough part is, like, when it comes to the trade deadline, you kind of have to, meet the demands of what the trade is requiring. And I think that's what Mo would tell you is why it required a player of Tommy Edman to get a starter. And at that point in time, they still thought they had a legitimate chance to make the postseason. So they needed a strong starter. But I think anyone that's watched this team well enough knows that Eric Fetty wasn't going to be the answer.
Well, he'll get another chance on Friday night. The other guy that I want to highlight who was in the news a lot this week is Tyler O'Neill, because obviously the Cardinals traded him last winter. He hit his 30th home run for the Red Sox this week. We all know his injury history past. He's had some stints on the injury list in Boston too, but he's actually made it onto the field for 101 games. And as I say, they mentioned the 30 home runs. I don't think you'll find anybody in St. Louis who thought it wasn't time to trade Tyler O'Neill last winter. But it's what you got in return. You got 2 pitchers, one of which who has since been designated for assignment, claimed by the Angels, the relief pitcher. The second guy, Victor Santos, is still in the organization pitching in Memphis with a 5.5 ERA. Is that the best you could get for a guy who can hit 30 home runs, has won the Gold Glove in his career? I don't know. I mean, to me, that's where I have the issue with the trades.
And to me, the question is, where is that falling in the front office? And as we make these changes with Gary LaRocque retiring and things like that, is that the scouting department that's missing the boat? Is that our coaching staff that's just not able to coach them up to what they're capable of playing when they were with other teams? Where are we missing the boat that the guys that we're getting back aren't turning out the way that they should be?
Right. And I think that's the thing is, I'm not trying to say they shouldn't have traded these guys. And I'll put Dylan Carlson in the same boat. I think it probably was a time to move him and let him get a fresh start somewhere else. It just didn't seem like it was going to happen in St. Louis. You got a relief pitcher who was here for 3 weeks and you designated him for assignment and he gets claimed by the Cubs. For a player that, and he started out really well with Tampa, but he's kind of fallen back here lately. He's not hitting as well as I know he would like, as well as Tampa would like. But he's a 25-year-old former first-round pick, former number 1 prospect in the organization with 2.5 years of control left under his contract. And you got a guy that didn't make it through a first month with here. So the other guy I'll throw in this boat was a first baseman who they just did not offer a contract to last winter, letting him become a free agent, signing for getting nothing in return, is Juan Yepez, who's playing first base regularly now for the Washington Nationals, hitting 287, 5 home runs in his first 50 games since he got called up from AAA. So I think you have to kind of, as I say, as you look forward and kind of the future moves that this club is going to make, they always say the reason to study history is so you don't repeat it, and I think that's something you have to figure out is why all of these trades have turned out so poorly for the Cardinals.
We traded 2 major league everyday players and have already released 2 of the 3 guys we got this trade deadline.
Yeah.
And again, to me, that's on the front office. And I don't know where the question is. Is it we didn't scout the right players? Is it we're, not having the ability to coach them to what they need to be, or where are we missing that boat? And I'm really curious to see what shakeup Gary LaRocque and this, minor league system start to have here this offseason.
I think that's the biggest question the Cardinals have to ask themselves as they make plans going forward for 2025. They have to have the answers to those questions, so we can't repeat all of those mistakes. I do think one thing the Cardinals got right, and I want to just salute a story that we got elsewhere running on the website in the last couple of minutes we have here at the podcast, and that's the first-round pick this season, J.J. Weatherholt, the infielder out of West Virginia, 7th overall pick. I had a chance to go down when we were in Palm Beach last week and spent some time with him and wrote a long-form feature that's up on the website about how he ended up with the Cardinals, how he ended up being the 7th overall pick in the draft. And I think if people find it interesting, a very encouraging kid. And first 2 games of the postseason down there, he's pitched really well, hit a home run his first at bat in his first playoff game, and helped Palm Beach win that first round. They'll go into the Florida State League Championship Series starting on Sunday. So I encourage people to check out that story as well. And thanks to all of our sponsors for making that trip possible.
There are a lot of young guys and it's not saying that the Cardinals or the front office hasn't gotten a lot of these right, because they have, right? There's still a lot of good players that it's just a matter of how they progress here shortly, right? Because there's a lot of young guys in this organization that are going to make exciting impacts here very soon, right? What do you do with Chris Cepho? What do you do with Tink Hence? Is Nolan Gorman going to figure out the strikeout issue here? Is Jordan Walker going to get the power back? I mean, there's a lot of exciting things that can make this team very good for a long time with a lot of young talent.
I'm glad you mentioned Gorman, because I was going to bring him up as well. It doesn't seem like there's any intention to bring him up again before that Memphis season is over. They've got a week to go down there, and I think his future is very much a question as well. It's what you do with him, what decisions you make with him. You figure out where Sajisi is going to play. You got Donovan still in the mix. You've got so they've got a lot of decisions as far as say how they're going to split up playing time and where these guys are going to play. So be interesting to see. Well, 16 games left in the season, beginning with the 3 games this weekend in Toronto. Then the Cardinals come back home, have one final homestand starting on Monday. They'll play 4 games against the Pirates, 3 games against the Cleveland Guardians, and then in the season, on the regular season at least, on the road. 23-25 is one stat that I'll throw at you. That's the Cardinals' record within the National League Central. So they've got a chance to finish over 500 with this series with the Pirates. So as you're thinking about next year, don't forget we've already set the date for our spring training bash party down into Homewood Suites and Palm Beach Gardens, March the 11th. Will be that party next year. The link to the reservations is already set up for our special discount rate at the Homewood Suites. If you're planning a trip down to spring training, you can go to the website, stlsportspace.com, go to the spring training tab, click on that, and they'll take you to the spring training page, which has all the details about how to make your reservation down there for that special rate. Rooms are limited at that rate, so we do encourage you to make reservations as soon as you know your travel plans. That rate applies for all of spring training, so even if you're not going to be able to make it down for the date of the party, that link would work to get you a reservation for any time during the 6 weeks or so of spring training.
And I think when you look at the remaining schedule for this team, I hold out hope, because I think that I'm hoping we're just not going to win a series, but go on a little run. And I think that's what's frustrating is you look at this Cincinnati team, and you probably and should have gotten a sweep there, right? And so you look at a couple things like that, and you look at the fact that you only play one team left above 500 in Cleveland. And, go find a way to win all 4 games against Pittsburgh and find a way to close out this schedule strong. And, all of a sudden, if you can win 7 or 8 in a row, it becomes a different feeling, right?
Sure. And you want to end strong. I think they also want to end strong, even if they fall a little bit short of the playoffs and miss it by a couple of games. I just think you want to have a good feeling of what to look forward to at the end of the season. You always want to play well down the stretch and not just kind of mail it in. So it'll be interesting to see how it ends up starting on Friday night in Toronto. We'll have all the action covered for you here on stlsportspage.com. Mike, thanks for the visit. We'll talk to everybody again next week here on the Reins on the Cardinals podcast.